We ended previously with the Buddha instructing Rahula in honesty. And now it goes on to the next chapter, chapter 6, Anathapindika. And in previous talks, I think I had mentioned that I thought the Buddha had never spent the Vasa at the bamboo grove in Rajagaha, but here, according to Life of the Buddha, he actually spent the second and third Vasas there. So perhaps it depends on the different accounts. But according to this, he did actually spend the Vasa there. The first rains after his enlightenment was spent by the Buddha at Benares. The second and third were spent at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove. It is after the third rains that Anathapindika, the feeder of the poor, makes his appearance. The occasion was this. The Buddha, the Blessed One, was living at that time at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, and there had been no pronouncement made by him about dwellings for bhikkhus. And we'll notice that it doesn't say, "Thus have I heard," it says the occasion was this, and if we remember from the introduction, that means it's Venerable Upali. This is a story from the Vinaya. There had been no pronouncement made by the Blessed One about dwellings for bhikkhus. They were living here and there in the woods, at the roots of trees, under overhanging rocks, in ravines, in hillside caves, in charnel grounds, in jungle thickets, in the open, on heaps of straw. As they left such places in the early morning, they inspired confidence, whether in moving forward or returning, looking ahead or aside, bending or stretching. Their eyes were downcast, and they moved with grace. During that time, a rich merchant of Rajagaha visited the park. He saw them as they went about thus, and in his heart he trusted them. He approached them and asked, "Lords, if I had dwellings built, would you live in them?" The Blessed One has not allowed dwellings. Then, Lords, ask the Blessed One and tell me what he says. They told this to the Blessed One. He gave his permission, and when he had done so, they told the merchant. In a single day, he had 60 dwellings built. Then he invited the Blessed One and the Sangha for the following day's meal. At the end of the meal, he formally presented the dwellings to the Sangha. This merchant's sister was the wife of Anathapindika, who chose at the time to come to Rajagaha on some business or other, at the very time, in fact, when the Sangha of bhikkhus, headed by the Buddha, had been invited by the merchant for the following day. The merchant was directing his servants and retainers, "Now get up early, cook gruel and rice and sauces, make dessert sweets." Anathapindika thought, "Formerly when I came, this householder used to lay aside all his engagements to welcome me. Now he seems distracted with ordering his servants about. Is there a taking in marriage or a giving in marriage? Or is there some great sacrifice? Or has he invited Sanya Bimbisara, king of Magadha, for tomorrow with a full retinue?" When the merchant had finished directing his servants, he went to Anathapindika and welcomed him. Then, when he had sat down beside him, Anathapindika told him his thoughts. He replied, "There is no marriage, nor has the king been invited for tomorrow with a full retinue. But I have a great sacrifice. I have invited for tomorrow the Sangha of bhikkhus headed by the Buddha, the Enlightened One. Did you say the Buddha? I say the Buddha. Do you say the Buddha? I say the Buddha. Do you say the Buddha? I say the Buddha." This news, the Buddha, is hard to come by in the world. Is it possible to go and see this Blessed One, accomplished and fully enlightened, now at this time? This is not the time to go and see him. You can see him early tomorrow. Then Anathapindika thought, "Early tomorrow I shall be able to see a Blessed One, accomplished and fully enlightened." He lay down thinking of the Buddha. 3 times in the night he got up, fancying it was dawn. Then he went to the Sivaka gate. Non-human beings opened the gate. As soon as he was out of the city, light left him and darkness was before him. Fear, awe, and horror arose in him. He wanted to turn back, but the invisible spirit Sivaka made himself heard. 100 elephants, 100 horses, 100 chariots drawn by mules, 100,000 maidens decked with gems and earrings, all these are not even worth a 16th part of one step forward now. Go forward, householder, go forward. Better go forward than turn back. When the spirit had said this for the third time, darkness left him and light was before him. The fear, awe, and horror subsided in him. Then he went to the cool grove where the Buddha was. Now on that occasion, the Blessed One had risen early toward dawn and was pacing up and down in the open. He saw Anathapindika coming. When he saw him, he left his walk and sat down on a seat made ready for him. When he had done so, he said to Anathapindika, "Come, Sudatta." Anathapindika thought, "He addresses me by name," and he was happy and hopeful. He went to the Blessed One and prostrated himself at his feet, and he said, "I trust that the Blessed One has slept well." A Brahmin true sleeps ever well who has attained to full nibbana, whom sense desires leave intact, cooled without substance of existence. He has rejected all attachments. There's no conflict in his heart. He sleeps in bliss who is at peace, the peace established in the mind. Then the Blessed One gave Anathapindika progressive instruction. While Anathapindika sat there, the spotless, immaculate vision of the Dhamma arose in him. All that is subject to arising is subject to cessation. Then he became independent of others in the teacher's dispensation. He said, "Magnificent Lord, beginning from today, let the Blessed One receive me as his follower who has gone forth to him for refuge, for as long as breath lasts. Lord, let the Blessed One with the Sangha of bhikkhus accept tomorrow's meal from me." The Blessed One accepted in silence. Then, knowing that the Blessed One had accepted, he rose from his seat, and after paying homage to the Blessed One, he departed, keeping him on his right. The rich merchant of Rajagaha heard, "It seems that the Sangha of bhikkhus headed by the Buddha has been invited by Anathapindika." So he said to Anathapindika, "The Sangha of bhikkhus headed by the Buddha has been invited by you for tomorrow, but you are a guest. I will give you money to provide the food for the Sangha of bhikkhus headed by the Buddha." So this is something that was even happening then, where you see now sometimes in Thailand people competing to give the offering. And then Anathapindika says, "There is no need. I have money to provide food for the Sangha of bhikkhus headed by the Buddha." A citizen of Rajagaha heard of it, and he offered to provide the money, but Anathapindika refused. And Sainya Bimbisara, king of Magadha, offered likewise and was refused. Then, when that night was over, Anathapindika had good food of various kinds prepared at the merchant's house, and he had the time announced to the Blessed One. "It is time, Lord, the meal is ready." It now being morning, the Blessed One dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, he went accompanied by the Sangha of bhikkhus to the merchant's house, and he sat down on the seat made ready there. Then the householder Anathapindika served with his own hands the Sangha headed by the Buddha, and satisfied them with different kinds of good food. When the Blessed One had eaten and no longer had the bowl in his hand, Anathapindika sat down at one side. He said to the Blessed One, "Lord, let the Blessed One with the Sangha of bhikkhus consent to dwell with me at Savatthi for the rains." Perfect ones delight in rooms that are void, householder. "I know, Blessed One, I know, Sublime One." Then, when the Blessed One had instructed and urged and roused and encouraged Anathapindika with talk on the Dhamma, he rose from his seat and went away. At that time, Anathapindika had many friends and acquaintances to welcome him. When he had finished his business in Rajagaha, he set out for Savatthi. On the way, he directed people, "Sirs, make gardens, build dwellings, arrange gifts of food. A Buddha has appeared in the world. He has been invited by me. He will come by this road." Then those people did as he had directed them. When Anathapindika arrived at Savatthi, He looked all round the city for a suitable place, a suitable retreat, until he saw Prince Jeta's pleasure park, which had all the requisite qualities. He went to Prince Jeta and said, "Sir, give me your park to use." "The park is not to be given without the sum of 100,000 spread over it." "The park is taken, sir." "The park is not taken, householder." They asked arbitrating officers whether it was taken or not. The arbitrators said, "As soon as you set a value on it, sir, it was taken." Then Anathapindika had gold brought in carts, and he had Jeta's grove covered with 100,000 gold coins spread over it. The gold they brought at first was not enough to complete it, and there was a small space near the gate that was left uncovered. Anathapindika ordered people to go and fetch gold to cover the space. Then it occurred to Prince Jeta, "This can be no ordinary matter, since Anathapindika is spending so much gold." He told Anathapindika, "Enough, householder, do not cover that space. Leave me that space, it shall be my gift." Anathapindika thought, "This Prince Jeta is a prominent, well-known person. It will be very good if such well-known people acquire confidence in the Dhamma and discipline." So he left that space for Prince Jeta, who had a gatehouse built on it. Then Anathapindika had dwellings erected in Jeta's grove. He had open terraces laid out. He had gates made, waiting halls put up, fire rooms, storehouses, and closets built, walks leveled, well rooms prepared, baths constructed, bathrooms arranged, ponds excavated, and pavilions raised. So that story is from the Vinaya. And then we come back into the suttas. "Thus I heard, while the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, he was sitting in the open on one occasion in the blackness of the night, and it was lightly drizzling. Then Mara the Evil One, who wanted to frighten him and make his hair stand up, assumed the form of a huge royal Naga serpent and approached the Blessed One. His body was as big as a boat made of a single tree trunk. His hood was as broad as a brewer's mat. His eyes were as big as Kosalan brass plates. His tongue flickered in and out of his mouth like forked lightning in and out of a thundercloud. The sound of his breathing was like the sound of a smith's bellows blowing. Then the Blessed One recognized Mara the Evil One and spoke to him in stanzas. A hermit, perfect in restraint, lives out his life in lonely haunts. There he should live who has renounced, for that is right for him and for his like. Many are the wild beasts, many are the terrors, many the biting flies and crawling things, yet when a sage is trained in the wilderness, nothing of that can make his hair stand up. Though sky may split, though earth may quake, though beings all feel affright, though men may drive a dagger in his breast, no awakened one will ever turn for help to worldly things, the essentials of existence." Then Mara the Evil One understood. The Blessed One knows me, the Sublime One knows me. Sad and disappointed, he vanished at once. Now when the Blessed One had stayed at Rajagaha as long as he chose, he set out to wander by stages to Vesali. When he at length arrived there, he went to live in the hall with the pointed roof in the great wood. People were eagerly getting building work done at that time, and bhikkhus who were overseeing the work were being liberally supplied with robes, alms food, lodging, and medicinal requisites as curing for the sick. There was a poor tailor who thought, "This can be no ordinary matter, with these people eagerly getting building work done, and the bhikkhus overseeing the work being liberally supplied with robes, alms food, lodging, and medicine. Suppose I did some building too." And this is back in the Vinaya, and this is where a lot of the different standards around how we build kutis and how we build monastery buildings comes about. It's all from these origin stories in the Vinaya. Then the poor tailor himself puddled some clay and made up some bricks, and then he set up a scaffold. But for want of skill, he built his wall crooked, and it fell down. The same thing happened a second and a third time. Then the poor tailor was annoyed, and he murmured and protested. The sons of Sakyans advise and instruct people who give them robes and alms food and lodging and medicine, but I am poor. No one advises and instructs me or oversees my building. Bhikkhus heard about this, and they told the Blessed One. Then he made this the reason for a talk on the Dhamma, and he addressed the bhikkhus thus. Bhikkhus, I allow building work to be formally allotted. A bhikkhu who oversees such building work shall take care to see that the dwelling is expeditiously completed, and he shall have what is damaged and broken repaired. When the Blessed One had stayed at Vesali as long as he chose, he set out to wander by stages to Savatthi. Now on that occasion, the followers of the bhikkhus belonging to a certain clique of 6, this is a famous group that comes up throughout the life of the Buddha, the group of 6, the Chabagya bhikkhus. There's not necessarily 6 of them, but it's a designation for these gang of miscreants. A certain clique of 6 went ahead of the Sangha of bhikkhus headed by the Buddha, and they took over lodgings and beds thus. This will be for our preceptors. This will be for our teachers. This will be for us. When the Venerable Sariputta arrived after the Sangha of bhikkhus headed by the Buddha, the lodgings and beds had all been taken over. Finding no bed, he went and sat down at the root of a tree. When the night was ending and it was near dawn, the Blessed One got up and he coughed. The Venerable Sariputta coughed. Who is there? It is I, Sariputta, Blessed One. It is I, Sariputta, Blessed One. Why are you sitting there, Sariputta? Then the Venerable Sariputta told what had happened. The Blessed One made this the reason to call the bhikkhus together, and he asked them if it was true. They said that it was. He administered a rebuke. Bhikkhus, this does not rouse faith in the faithless or increase faith in the faithful. Rather, it keeps the faithless without faith and harms some of the faithful. After he had administered the rebuke and given a talk on the Dhamma, he addressed the bhikkhus thus. Bhikkhus, who is worthy of the best seat, the best water, the best alms food? Some bhikkhus said that it was one gone forth from a warrior noble family. Others said it was one gone forth from a Brahmin family, from a householder family. Others said that it was one who specialized in recitation of discourses, in recitation of the discipline, who preached the Dhamma, who had obtained the first meditation, the second meditation, the third meditation, the fourth meditation, that it was a stream enterer, a once-returner, a non-returner, an arhat, that it was one who had the 3 true knowledges. Still others said that it was one who had the 6 kinds of direct knowledge. Then the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus. Once, bhikkhus, somewhere in the Himalayas there was a large banyan tree, under which 3 companions lived. They were a partridge, a monkey, and an elephant. They were often rude and disrespectful, and they lived without consideration for one another. They thought, if only we could find out which of us is the oldest, then we could honor, respect, revere, and venerate him and follow his advice. The partridge and the monkey asked the elephant, how far back can you remember? When I was a calf, I used to walk over this banyan tree so that it passed between my legs and its topmost branch scratched my stomach. Then the partridge and the elephant asked the monkey, how far back can you remember? When I was a baby, I used to sit on the ground and nibble the topmost shoots of this banyan tree. Then the monkey and the elephant asked the partridge, how far back can you remember? In a certain place there was a big banyan tree. I ate one of its seeds and voided it in this place, and this banyan tree grew from that seed, so I am older than you. Then the monkey and the elephant said to the partridge, you are older than us. We will honor, respect, revere, and venerate you and follow your advice. After that, the partridge made the monkey and the elephant undertake the 5 precepts, and he undertook them himself. And they were courteous and respectful to one another and lived with mutual consideration. On the dissolution of the body after death, they appeared in a happy destination in the heavenly world, so that came to be called the partridge's holy life. Those that reverence an elder are reckoned skillful in the Dhamma, for they have both praise here and now and happy destiny beyond. Now, bhikkhus, these animals could be courteous and respectful to each other and live with mutual consideration. Try and copy them. Now that you should be rude and disrespectful and live without mutual consideration under a Dhamma and discipline as well proclaimed as this does not rouse faith in the faithless or increase faith in the faithful. Rather, it keeps the faithless without faith and harms some of the faithful. And so that's the origin story of why we go about with seniority. We go by seniority according to how many reigns someone has, rather than if someone is a arhat or has the most merit or parami. So it just makes it very simple, well organized. Wandering by stages, the Blessed One at length arrived at Savatthi. There he went to stay in Jeta's grove, Anathapindika's park. Then Anathapindika went to the Blessed One and invited him for the following day's meal, which the Blessed One accepted in silence. When the meal was over and the Blessed One no longer had the bowl in his hand, Anathapindika sat down at one side and he asked, "Lord, how shall I act about this Jeta's grove?" Then, householder, you may present it to the Sangha of bhikkhus of the four quarters, past, future, and present. Even so, Lord, and this is still how it's done properly. So for somebody dedicating a Sangha, it's not like to you guys, the group, but it's to the Sangha of the four quarters, past, present, and future. Even so, Lord, he replied, and he did so. Then the Blessed One addressed him with these stanzas. It keeps out cold and heat, wild animals besides, and creeping things and flies, and chills and rain as well, and it affords protection when sun and wind are fierce. The aim is to be sheltered and at ease in order to concentrate and practice insight. Gifts of dwellings to the order are praised most highly by the Buddha. So let a man possessed of wisdom, who sees wherein his own good lies, have comfortable dwellings made and have the learned live in them. He can give food to them and drink, and clothing and a resting place, letting his heart repose its trust in those who walk in righteousness, and they will teach the Dhamma to him for freedom from all suffering, knowing which Dhamma he here attains Nibbana and is free from taints. Then when he had given this blessing, he got up from his seat and went away. Now I'll flesh that out a little bit more about Anathapindika. There's some really good principles that get highlighted by the story of Anathapindika. After establishing the monastery, Anathapindika was assiduous in his support for the resident Sangha. And this is from Great Disciples of the Buddha, the chapter on Anathapindika, page 341. He provided the monks dwelling there with all necessities. Each morning he sent rice gruel, and each evening he supplied all the requirements of clothing, alms bowls, medicines. All repairs and upkeep in Jetavana were undertaken by his servants. Above all, several hundred monks came daily to his home, a 7-story mansion, to receive the forenoon meal. Every day at mealtime, his home was filled with saffron robes and the ambiance of saintliness. You'll hear another name in these paragraphs too, Visakha, Lady Visakha, who comes up later, and she had offered the palace of Migara's mother. So Visakha is the mother of someone named Migara. And so that also became a monastery in the vicinity of, the area of Savatthi. When King Pasenadi learned of Anathapindika's generosity, he wished to imitate him, and so he supplied alms for 500 monks daily. One day, as he was on his way to talk with the monks, he learned from his servants that the monks were taking the food away with them and giving it to their supporters in the city, who would offer it back to them. The king was mystified, for he had always provided very tasty food, and so he asked the Buddha about the reason for the monk's behavior. The Buddha explained to the king that in the palace, the courtiers distributed the food without any inner feeling, just following orders as if they were cleaning out a barn or taking a thief to court. They lacked faith and had no love for the monks. Many of them even thought the monks were parasites living by the labor of the working population. When anything was given in that spirit, no one could feel comfortable accepting it, even when the meal was made of the most delicious food. In contrast, the faithful householders of the city, like Anathapindika and Visakha, welcomed the monks and regarded them as spiritual friends who lived for the welfare and benefit of all beings. A humble meal provided by a friend would be worth much more than the most sumptuous meal offered by someone who did not give in the right spirit. The Buddha added a verse for the king to remember. A dish may be insipid or savory, the food may be meager or abundant, yet if it is given by a friendly hand, then it becomes a delicious meal. And then continuing on, life of the Buddha. The Buddha, who was now staying at Savatthi, capital of Kosala, had come from the country of Magadha, whose capital was Rajagaha. Magadha was one of the two most powerful states in central India at that time. It lay south of the Ganges, with its northern border on the river. Its king was Bimbisara, who had already declared himself an adherent of the Buddha. Bimbisara's brother-in-law, King Pasenadi, governed the other great kingdom called Kosala, which stretched north from the north bank of the Ganges to the foothills of the Himalayas. King Pasenadi had, it seems, not so far met the Buddha. Thus I heard, it was when the Blessed One was living at Savatthi that a dearly beloved only son of a citizen of Savatthi had died. The father went to the Blessed One, who asked him, "Householder, your faculties seem those as one who is out of his mind. Your faculties seem in no normal state." "How should my faculties seem in their normal state, Lord? My dearly beloved only son is dead. Since his death I have given no more thought to my work or my meals. I keep going to the charnel ground and crying, 'My only child, where are you? My only child, where are you?' So it is, householder, so it is. Dear ones who endear themselves bring sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair." "Who would ever think that, Lord? Dear ones, Lord, who endear themselves bring happiness and joy." He got up, dissenting and disapproving of the Blessed One's words, and went away. Now on that occasion some gamblers were playing with dice, not far from the Blessed One. The householder went to them and related his conversation. They said, "So it is, householder, so it is. Dear ones who endear themselves bring happiness and joy." Then, thinking, "I agree with the gamblers," he got up and went on his way. This story eventually reached the royal palace. King Pasenadi of Kosala told the queen, "Malika, what is this that the monk Gotama has said? Dear ones who endear themselves bring sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair." "Sire, if that has been said by the Blessed One, then that is so." "No matter what the monk Gotama says, this Malika applauds it. If that has been said by the Blessed One, then that is so. She speaks just like a pupil who applauds no matter what the teacher says. So it is, teacher, so it is. Be off, Malika, away with you." Then Queen Malika told Nali Janga of the Brahmin caste, "Go to the Blessed One and pay homage to him in my name, and ask this, 'Lord, have these words been spoken by the Blessed One? Dear ones who endear themselves bring sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Take note of his reply and tell me, for perfect ones speak nothing untrue.'" He did as he had been asked. The Blessed One said, So it is, Brahman, so it is. Dear ones who endear themselves bring sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And how that is so can be understood from this. Once in this same Savatthi there was a woman whose mother died, owing to which she lost her mind and wandered mad from street to street and from crossing to crossing, asking, "Have you seen my mother? Have you seen my mother?" The Buddha then went on to relate a large number of stories to the same effect, concluding as follows. And there was once in this same Savatthi a woman who was married and lived with her husband's family, but her own relatives wanted to divorce her from her husband and give her to another whom she did not like. She told her husband of this. He stabbed her to death and killed himself, thinking, "In death we shall be together." It can be understood from this, too, how dear ones who endear themselves bring sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Nali Janga returned to the queen and told her what had been said. She thereupon went to King Pasenadi and asked him, "Sire, what is your opinion? Is Princess Vajiri dear to you?" "Yes, Malika, she is dear to me." "Sire, what is your opinion? If a change, an alteration, took place in Princess Vajiri, would that bring sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair?" "Any change, any alteration in Princess Vajiri would mean an alteration in my life. How could sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair not arise in me?" "Sire, it was with reference to this that the Blessed One, who knows and sees, accomplished and fully enlightened, said, 'Dear ones who endear themselves bring sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair.'" The queen pressed the point with the examples of Queen Wasabha, the king's son Vidudaba, herself, and his kingdoms of Kasi and Kosala in the same manner. Then the king said, "Malika, it is wonderful, it is marvelous how far the Blessed One penetrates and sees with understanding. Come, give me the ablution water." I'm not quite sure what that means. But, Then King Pasenadi got up from his seat, and arranging his upper robe on one shoulder, he raised his hands palms together toward where the Blessed One was, and he uttered this exclamation 3 times, "Honor to the Blessed One, accomplished and fully enlightened." It's the Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. That's from Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta 87, for anybody who would want to see the rest of that sutta. The next incident perhaps records how the king first met the Buddha. So this actually goes well in this next section together, so I'll just end it there. We have about 10 minutes for questions, comments.
You said that the Sangha, the 4 directions, past, present, future. What's the 4?
Like north, south, east, and west. Like the Sangha anywhere.
Sangha anywhere.
Yeah. Sangha, the 4 quarters. I think it's quite beautiful because it's not like I offer this to you and your students only or whatever. It's like it's very impersonal. It's like everything the Buddha does in the Vinaya, it goes against favoritism and just trying to give precedence to just a few individuals.
Unity, not division. There's a lot of
I'm sorry?
Like there's a lot of unity. He speaks mostly on concord, not discord. Like
concord, not discord, but also not favoritism. So it's normal for people might show favoritism to certain groups based on if they're more charming or they give better Dhamma talks or whatever. And the Buddha was always coming back to, you offer it to the Sangha, make it a personal Sangha, the four quarters, all the different directions, past, present, future.
Interesting point is the Abhayagiri modeled our whole administrative structure based on that principle. So all the buildings and property and everything is owned by the Sangha, not by the individual or not by the lay stewards and everything.
There was actually a lot of discussions in the early years between, particularly Ajahn Amaro and Arthur Martin, as a lawyer who consulted in trying to set up the legal structure according to California law so that it fit into the, say, Sangha law or Sangha tradition. So it's quite really, and it's quite unique. Our template has been used by many monasteries because it was different monasteries ran into various problems that over things like ownership or how things were administered.
Yeah, that's how it is with like Sangha Foundation and Abhayagiri Monastic Foundation, so having two non-profit foundations, one that Sangha directed by lay people, the stewards, they're like the stewards,
yeah.
And that's the money, which isn't allowable for bhikkhus, but then the Abhayagiri Monastic Foundation, the assets or the land, and is transferred over. Once purchased, is transferred over to a Abhayagiri Monastic Foundation, so it's like a land holding foundation, which is owned by the Sangha, which then if something was to happen where the board of directors decided let's take the money and run or something, we would still own the land.
We'd still have a monastery.
We'd still have a monastery.
Which has actually happened in our tradition. I mean, it's
like in Thailand.
Well, in Thailand, but also in the West.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was very fraught. Wasn't sure. I mean, there's one particular monastery. It was touch and go whether it was going to actually kind of survive.
I didn't know about that.
Oh yeah.
I thought, oh yeah, in the West we're not there yet.
Oh yeah.
It's normal in Thailand. Super corrupt monasteries.
And not in our tradition, but like another Theravada tradition that had a monastery in the Bay Area, West Coast. Their monastery actually was taken because it was owned by the lay group, and there was a big disagreement between the Sangha and the lay people, and the lay people actually just came out.
Oh no, I know what you're talking. Yeah. Okay.
I'm wondering what there were like requirements or certain like standards to be met by a layperson if they were to support a monastic, like for a retreat, like their own residence or something like that.
Well, a lot of it it as just, is it actually practical? Is it feasible? Is it burdensome? Is it useful? Is it beneficial? Those are more of the, those trying to get those different balances of one, is that actually a good idea? Two, in terms of beneficial for both parties, and then two, is it actually feasible and not burdensome? I mean, there's actually rules in the Vinaya that censure and try to help protect the lay community, so that it doesn't turn into the Sangha, or individuals don't turn into burdens on the lay people.
The Buddha was unbelievably pure in the way he related to the lay community. Like there's these vignettes in the Vinaya where it's like somebody offers the Buddha and the Sangha a meal, and then the Buddha says, "Do you know how big the Sangha is? Do you know what you're getting yourself into? Do you know how many monks there is? There's 500 monks." Yeah. And then they say, "Yes, I know." Then he accepts, but he makes sure they know what they're doing.
I remember there was a story that Anathapindika was dying, and he was finally getting some kind of teaching. So were there other, I forgot what the themes were, but were there other significant occasions that Anathapindika received teachings?
Yeah, that's actually the very next, the one I was going to read, but we ran out of time. It actually jumps forward in time to Anathapindika's death, and he actually had a really strong connection with Sariputta, so he had a tremendous faith in Sariputta and received a lot of teachings from Sariputta.
He's also offered some pretty amazing teachings as well.
He gives teachings too, that's right.
Mm-hmm.